Okay, today we're going to start our three-part look at Rome. We had 3 parts in Greece. I figured it would only be fair to do the same with Rome since they stole everything from the Greeks. So we'll look at that, and then we'll do chapter 8, and then it'll be time for your midterm. Gosh, where has the semester gone? All right, so when we examine Rome, we're going to discuss all of these things, and I'm not going to read all those. So here's where we are talking about the Roman Empire evolved from the city of Rome through a series of emperors, and they grew and they conquered. Everything you see there that's in purple was once part of the Roman Empire, and the stuff that's in pink was also part of the Roman Empire, albeit a little bit later. So that includes Great Britain, parts of Germany, Austria, and of course Egypt as well. So when you want to understand what the Romans were about and why they were able to conquer as much land as they were able to. They were extremely well organized, and that's what it comes down to, and that's why they were able to easily absorb Greece. The Greeks remained separate city-states, so they were easy to conquer. The Romans were the opposite of that. They made it possible for anyone, whether you were in Great Britain or Assyria, you could become a Roman citizen. And so that through also the establishment of a common language, common religion, common architectural styles, statuary, that sort of thing, you were always reminded who was in charge and who was in control. It's the Romans. So through all of those things, they were able to maintain their empire. Some similarities and differences. Athens, which was considered to be the center of Greek culture, was at its peak for only about 100 years. The Roman Empire was at its peak for about 500 years. It will eventually sort of split in half and then splinter off. And it never really goes away completely, but at its height, which was about 2nd and 3rd centuries, it was the bomb. In artwork, we see a logical transition in Greek sculpture, for example, from the archaic style to the early classical to the severe to the late classical to the Hellenistic style, and that filters all throughout Greek society. Roman art is divided up a little differently. They have a patrician style, which was the style of the upper class, the official style of the Republic of Rome, and then you have the plebeian style, or the lower class, the popular style. And then within each of those styles, they have different goals. The Romans appropriated the Greek religion and Romanized it, so it's the same gods and goddesses, they just have different names. And they did the same thing with architecture. They took the Greek style and then they kind of put their own spin on it, as you'll see. Roman women were given a higher status than Greek women in society. Roman women could own property and they could be seen in public, and occasionally would write things and be published. So not so with Greek women. Greek women stayed home and kept house and raised children. In sculpture, the Greeks will focus on the ideal form of the man, not really individuality, and so that's why they all look the same. Whenever they want to record someone, they record them at their best. It's not really, there's not an idea of individualism, it's of an ideal type. All of that is to support the humanistic philosophy. Whereas in Rome, art is more commemorative and based on historical fact. You want to cement your link in the chain. You want to establish your pedigree and so forth. So we start to record how people actually looked, not some sort of idealized fantasy of what the perfect person should be, but the Romans record them warts and all, except with the exception of the emperor, who gets a little glossed over because he's the emperor, and that's what you expect. All right, beginning in architecture, we're going to start with residences, the domicile, and there are three main types of domiciles. The domus is where the patricians live. This is private home. The insula, which is where the plebeians lived, and those are like apartment buildings. And then the villa, which is usually reserved for the emperor and a few senators who happen to have enough money to afford a villa. A villa is essentially like a small city almost, where someone can reside. The styles of all of these different types of domiciles is consistent all throughout the Roman Empire. It's the same style whether you are in Athens or whether you are in Great Britain or whether you're in Egypt. The Roman style is the same, and that's to remind the people of the empire that you are a subject of Rome. And so the Romans were very effective at using architecture as a form of propaganda and promoting themselves and trying to keep the people placated. And if you don't do that, if you don't keep the people happy, then they rebel and they rise up and they secede and they are unhappy. The Romans want happy people. So they have a way to do that, and I'll show you some of those ways. All right, the first one we're going to see is the domus. This is the floor plan of the House of the Faun in Pompeii. It's fairly typical of what we would expect to see from a domus. Most domiciles have a series of different rooms with different functions. There's usually an atrium, which is sort of a meeting hall, living room, I guess you could say. And then there are peristyle gardens. There are different bedrooms for the occupants. There are slave quarters, kitchens, all that sort of thing. And most of it is usually connected to a large sort of outdoor courtyard called a peristyle. Or if they're growing food there, it's a peristyle garden. And that's also a place of assembly and also to kind of cosify the domus, if you will, make it a little more human friendly. A lot of the best examples that we have of Roman architecture, especially the domus, come to us from Pompeii. Pompeii, Herculaneum, those were two of the largest towns that were buried in volcanic ash with the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD. It pretty much froze both of those cities in time, including all the people that were still in them that couldn't get away. Pompeii, you have to look at through a certain kind of lens. It was a sort of Romanized version of Las Vegas. Any naughtiness you wanted to do, Pompeii was the place to go. So how do we know that? Because it's so well preserved. All the brothels for the prostitutes are preserved, along with the paintings on the walls for the illiterate who wanted certain things. If you couldn't explain it in words or look at the price list, then there was a picture of what you could do in each room, and then you would know where you needed to be. So here is sort of a map of Vesuvius. There's the mountain, and then it erupted. The wind blew it down this way. It completely covers Pompeii and Herculaneum, and kept everything preserved as it was the day the eruption took place, including a lot of the domuses that we're going to see. There's a sort of reconstruction view of a typical Roman house, a domus, and you can see they have a lot of open air roofs, not a lot of windows, usually one or two doors to get inside. There are some windows, but not too many. And so light, ventilation, all of that comes from openings in the roof. Here are some of the different parts of the domus, and I'll show you most of these. That hole in the roof, the compluvium, and then there's usually an impluvium, which is a recessed area in the floor that would fill with rainwater, and also through evaporation kind of cool the house down. We'll see the atrium. I'll show you a cubiculum and a peristyle and a few other different types of rooms. So here is another house in Pompeii, the house of the Silver Wedding, and you can see that opening in the ceiling that allows light and ventilation to come through, and then the impluvium in the floor that would fill with rainwater, and then there's an opening at the end that opens onto a nice peristyle garden. There's a color version because I know you kids like the color pictures, so I found color versions whenever I could. You can see the result of the water sort of pooling there. Plants end up growing there. This is also the place, the atrium, where they would have a shelf, and on this shelf that goes all around the perimeter of the room, you'd have portrait busts of all your relatives so that you could trace your heritage, your lineage back to so-and-so to prove how important you were and what your link in the chain was. There's one more where they've kept it all kind of cleaned up for us and scraped all of the algae out of the impluvium in the floor. The walls would be covered with murals, different types of murals, and we'll go over that when we get to Roman painting. All of it meant to be very comfortable and human-friendly, sometimes to make the rooms look bigger than they really are, but really just to make it more organic and a nicer place to be than a big concrete box. There's a cubiculum. That's what a typical Roman bedroom would look like, and they've got a nice window there. Sometimes the windows had glass in them. The Romans did have glass and used it to make window panes, bottles, and so forth. It wasn't very advanced, but it did exist and had a foundation. It's hard to control glass kilns when you don't have any temperature gauges or anything like that. These are all wood-fired. So you can see the paintings on the wall, fake windows that open onto fake gardens to give you a sense of bigger space. And then the floor, and again, depending on what house it was, would be covered with elaborate mosaics. And it just creates a very opulent sort of living area. There's a view of the peristyle garden. These gardens were usually planted with flowering plants, fruit trees occasionally, and then the smaller one that connected to the kitchen would grow herbs and vegetables and things for daily meals and that sort of thing, all kept up by the slaves. There's another view. This is also where you would put your statuary, and if you were particularly wealthy, perhaps you could even afford a fountain in your peristyle garden. A lot of these cities had running water thanks to the aqueduct, which we will look at shortly. There's one that has been replanted along with all the obnoxious tourists that you're going to run into when you go to Pompeii. It's still worth going to. Don't let me turn you off from a visit to Pompeii whenever you go to Rome. Make the day trip down there. You won't regret it. Here is another peristyle garden. The little squares you see in the floor, those are drainage holes. All this would have been filled in with dirt and then planted with fragrant trees and shrubs and fruit trees and that sort of thing, because it's the palace peristyle garden of Diocletian, one of the biggest asshole emperors that ever lived. He enjoyed persecuting Christians. Diocletian was the one who liked to tie them to the tops of wooden poles and set them on fire and use them as street lights to light the way to Rome in the evening. So this is his garden where he would go and relax and listen to the screams of Christian street lights outside as he's sipping his wine and doing the things that emperors do. It's pretty big. You can imagine how many people could crowd into this space and enjoy parties and that sort of thing. Here's some tourists walking amongst the ruins. The palace is still intact. It's right on its own little private lake, which is pretty fantastic. So a lot of the buildings that we're going to see incorporate concrete, and concrete is one of the great gifts that the Romans contributed to the history of architecture. It's made through a recipe that I'll show you in just a moment, but it allows you to form basically any shape that you want. And then also the use of the arch. We've had corbelling and we've had post and lintel systems, but to be able to make a rounded archway gives us a great deal of flexibility with not only openings but also ceilings. Ceilings don't have to be flat plank timber roofs anymore. Now you can have stone ceilings which last a lot longer, and they are great for acoustics, and they're great for fireproofing and so forth. If you take one arc and stretch it, then you get a vault. And if you get one vault and intersect it with a second vault, then you get a groin vault. And you can see that you can get as complicated as you want with this fenestrated groin vaulting. And then you can take an arch and circle it back onto itself, and you get a dome, hemispherical dome. You can combine all of these things in any number of ways, and the Romans did. So through being able to make things out of concrete and incorporating the arch, we get really nice, interesting, complex architecture that has stood the test of time. These are just a couple of examples of different vaults and also dome supports that we are able to achieve. That's what Roman concrete used to look like. They would heat up limestone and combine it with seawater and volcanic ash, and then chunks of tufa or volcanic rock to create this kind of aggregate sort of concrete. It's sort of crude and rough, but it does the job. So you make your form of whatever building you're going to make, and you fill it with concrete, and then once it sets, then you face it with bricks. And if you were feeling particularly lavish, then you might even add a layer of fine marble on the outside of that. So they're quite innovative in how they were able to construct these buildings. Here's some early examples of domes and half domes, so you can see not only the innovative use of the arch, but also concrete. Both of those things together form these very strange hunting baths, a very particular type of structure connected to a hunting lodge. This is where a lot of the gamekeepers would stay when they were acquiring animals to be brought into the amphitheaters to fight gladiators and fight each other and be slain for entertainment. If you go inside, that's what it looks like on the inside, kind of dark, kind of dismal, very small windows because the walls are very thick. Especially early on, the Romans tended to overcompensate a lot, as all of our builders have done up to this point. So the walls are pretty massive in order to support the weight of the masonry ceiling. On some of the walls, you can see some of the frescoes that have survived down to us, commemorating particularly good hunters, slaying leopards, or I think I have one with a panther or something like that. Sometimes you see them killing elephants, lions, bears, that sort of thing, painting a commemoration of these exotic animals on the walls a lot cheaper than trying to taxidermy their heads, like that 18-point buck your granddad killed back in 1974 that's still hanging in his den, that sort of thing. This is a lot easier way to commemorate successful hunts. All right, so that's the domus. Now we'll look at the insula, which is the housing for the common man. This is where you and I would have lived back in the day, and they are basically big apartment buildings. They're usually arranged in a north, south, east, west grid, with the main opening of the building facing the street. So two buildings across the street face each other, which create kind of a communal area in the center where they can all go out and meet and congregate and so forth. The bottom floor of the insula was usually shops, merchants, offices, that sort of thing. And then the top floors were for residences. And depending on how rich you were, you may have your own residence, or you may have 4 or 5 families crammed into a single residence. And again, it all depends on your financial status. There's another kind of reconstruction model of what it would have looked like in the day. You can see the incorporation of arches to create a nice colonnade or arcade, which is a row of arches. And then if they come down and form little columns, then they become colonnades. All of it, even in these insula, even in these apartment buildings for the everyday Joe, they're pretty well constructed, and they even take into account some sort of decor, some sort of decoration, so it doesn't matter. Here's a cutaway view so that you can kind of see how things were organized. You can see the bottom floor was shops and market stalls and that sort of thing. And then as we go up, we get living quarters depending on what your financial status is. The richer you were, the lower the floor were, because you didn't want to have to walk up all those stairs. I've hidden a picture of Waldo in here because I was being funny with the Roman version of Baldus. Where's Waldo? Can you see him? Have you spotted Waldo?
See him like around.
It's pretty lame. Yeah, it's right there. I tried to find a transparent background to put him like in one of those beds or something, but it didn't work. I had too much time this morning. So here's another view of the insula. Concrete core faced with brick. In this case, they've just left the brick because that's good enough for them. That they don't need any more than that. Only the wealthy could afford to have that marble facing. And then there's another view, and you can see the cobblestone streets out in front. Romans also very successful at making roads, which is another way that the empire was able to hold itself together. In fact, a lot of people credit just the roads, the fact that you're able to travel pretty easily from city to city, and trade routes and that sort of thing. It's pretty complex layering. You had these big, huge stones, and then gravel, and then smaller stones, and drainage, and the whole bit. A lot of those roads are still there today. You walk around Rome, you're walking on the same roads that they were walking on 2,000 years ago. It's pretty amazing. Here's the inside of a nicer little room in one of the insula. It's a groin vault, so it's a tunnel vault that has intersected another tunnel vault, which gives you these little ridges. It's not a dome, but it's painted to look like a dome. And this subject matter could be anything. It could be illusionistic architecture, it could be mythological scenes, it could be a tribute to a particular emperor. Anything to sort of dress it up on the inside was fair game. There's another view. Not bad, not a bad little apartment building. This is a fairly standard sort of city, and you can kind of see how all of these insula would be stacked next to one another and then separated north-south by streets, just like Roman army camps were. The basic layout of Roman cities, Roman civic construction is based on the layout of the military camp. And there's a typical layout for the Roman camp. They've got headquarter areas and then north-south streets, and then you've got different areas designated for storage and barracks and that kind of thing. And then the last type of living quarters I'll show you is the best of the best, the Roman villa. It's for the super rich, so that they can have a place to get away from it all. Most people who had villas also had a domus in the city, and sometimes, you know, it's just too much. You have to get away from all that power and money and relax, and so you go off to your villa. Several different kinds of villas. The three main ones: there's the Villa Urbana, which is a villa located within a city. There's the Villa Rustica, which is out in the country and usually has farmland and orchards and that sort of thing. And then the Villa Maritima, or the seaside villa, which was built so that it would have a lovely view of the sea. Here's a Villa Urbana from Austria from the 2nd century that has survived. There's a city right next to it, so you can have this complex of buildings, all of it sort of fenced in and reserved for the use of one particular person and their family. And you can see also tiled roofs, domes, half domes, all of those things kind of combined together. And then here is a seaside villa, usually arranged to give you the best view possible. It's flown out of my head. Who's the Caligula's villa on the Isle of Capri? I think that's what this one is, so that you have this lovely view of the sea, view of the ocean. There's one more. You can see the sea in the background and get kind of a sense of just how lovely it was, except this was added later, obviously. So, and then the best of them, the Villa Rustica. These were the largest ones because they had the land that they could build on. And you can see we have a concrete core, and instead of baked bricks, we have local stone inset into the concrete for our fascia here, and then clay tile roofs. Probably the best of all the villas belong to Emperor Hadrian. This is a model of his villa, which still survives mostly in Tivoli, just outside of Rome. What Hadrian wanted to do, Hadrian liked to travel the empire. He didn't just stay in Rome. He would travel out to Egypt. He would travel to Great Britain and France and see all of the empire. And everywhere he went, he wanted to bring a little bit of it back. So he's got a replica of the Stoa. He's got a replica of the Grove of Academy, Plato's library in Greece. He's got architecture inspired from Egypt. He had a lover at the time, a young man named Antinous, who drowned in the Nile while they were out farting around in the empire, and got eaten by crocodiles. And so when he went back home, he established a religion dedicated to Antinous, and built the Canopus based on the Egyptian city of Canopo, and built a lot of statues dedicated to him and so forth. There's feasting halls, there's baths, there's athletic areas, theaters, residences, all of it in this little sort of mini Rome that became Hadrian's villa. There's what the baths looked like when there was still a little bit of ceiling left in the late 1700s, just to give you an idea of the complexity of these forms. And then then there's sort of a reconstruction. I'll go over the bathhouses later. They were quite complex little structures, but that gives you sort of a sense of the elaborateness. So if you were a guest of the emperor, you might be invited to a day in the baths, which was not just a bath, but there's usually a gymnasium and a library connected to that. You can go get a massage, and then you would be invited to a big banquet, and the banquets would go on for days and days, and people would just lie around on these couches and be fed the most exotic of foods, because it was the emperor, and the emperor's trying to impress. So stuffed peacock, flamingo tongues, and then there are slaves on the second floor above you dropping rose petals on you, so you have the scent of roses in the air while you're eating. And then you've got musicians performing for you, and then later this obviously will lead to a lot of corruption, because the emperors want their feasts to be bigger and bigger and bigger, and so they start raiding the Roman coffers and bankrupting the nation of Rome, all for these parties, which more often than not would devolve into orgies. So who has time to rule Rome when you've got a nice orgy happening? That's another thing that led to the downfall of Rome. A few floors from Hadrian's villa, just to give you an idea of the sumptuousness. Every one of these mosaic tiles, each one of these tessera, hand cut out of either stone or ceramic or glass, and then inset into wet concrete in order to decorate these floors. The designs are familiar to us. This reminds us of our Grecian key design we saw on geometric vase painting, and then we have a lot of floral motifs that came from Mesopotamia and Assyria. This is a nautical themed floor from a maritime villa. We see a lot of nautical themes, fish and octopuses and that sort of thing in the maritime villas, and also the baths. And we talked about that. For some reason, if there's a bathroom, people want to put seashells in it and relate it to the ocean somehow, and the Romans were not above that. You might even have a mosaic in your gymnasium, which is what we see here. This is a lady playing ball outside, but I thought it looked like she was telling us to talk to the hand. So I gave a fun fake Latin phrase at the top for your enjoyment. Speak us to Maya Hendus, which is nothing. It doesn't mean anything. It's just for my own jollies. Here is the canopus at Hadrian's villa, and you can see the statues of Antinous, and then the architecture here that's strictly decorative. There's no other function for this other than to decorate the space. We've gone beyond strictly utilitarian things, and now we can just enliven space itself with architecture that has no other function but to be a feast for the eyes. Some statuary around the canopus. Of course, there's a Nile crocodile there to commemorate his bloody end. And then you can see some of the buildings there in the background, all made from concrete, which was then faced with brick. The water there, those moats, those were all dug as well. There's a view down the length of the canopus, and here we have the caryatids from the Porch of the Maidens at the Erechtheum in Athens. He brought reproductions of those back to have his own little piece of Greece there at his Roman villa. One more view from the back, and then there's Antinous from the side. That's just part of it. Here's what's left of his maritime theater, where he could go and watch naval battles be enacted. There was a little drawbridge on it, so that he could go there and be alone and take the drawbridge up, so nobody could come and get him to sign expense reports or anything like that. That's That's what it would have looked like back in the day. So people would do plays there or meet there, and he had little boats he could float around in the moat if he wanted to. Lots of reflecting pools and storage areas. This is all just a very small piece of the entire villa. And then one more view of the campus. Just outside of the villa grounds, there's the town of Tivoli, which is a lovely little town. Excellent little bakery there. They had the best biscotti I ever had. So, this is another villa. This is the Villa d'Este. It's different. It's a 16th century villa, but it's based on the older Roman villas, and it's just full of gardens and fountains and statuary, and it has that same sense of opulence that the ancient Roman villas would have had. This is a fountain, the fountain of Diana of Ephesus, as a mother goddess with her breasts spewing water, which is meant to symbolize sustenance and nutrition and that sort of thing. There's a lovely photo for you to make fun of. Take note of those sunglasses, because those are going to come back in just a minute. I have a great story about those. Some other civic architecture of the city, the Roman market. The Roman market was a multi-purpose area, usually around the city center or the forum, and the design is based on the Greek agora. You'll remember the Greek agora or outdoor market, where you had the shopping mall or the steos, and then you've got here in Rome the basilica, the temples, all of the things that you need, the meeting places, baths, all of them sort of located in the city center, including this elaborate gate. This is the market gate from the Miletus market area, and you can see that we've taken a few liberties. Remember, the Greeks had rules for their architecture, and they very rarely deviated from them. Things had to be viewed a certain way, and there were certain proportions. The Romans didn't have any of that. They felt free to reinterpret at will, especially with things based on the theater, which is what this market gate is based on. These little podiums that you see in the theater, this is where someone would come out and give a little monologue or something like that, and then retreat, and then the main performance area would be here out front. You can take pediments and you can break them apart, and you can recess part of them and project part of them, making really dramatic types of architecture, which is going to be the guts of the Baroque style later on. Baroque architecture takes a lot from this sort of interpretive approach to Roman items. There's another view. You can see these lovely composite columns on the bottom, holding everything up. Here's the remains of Trajan's market in Rome, which is basically like a shopping mall. Each of those little arches you see at the bottom, those are doorways that would then enter into a shop or a set of offices or something like that. And then there are repeated versions of those on a second level. Here's a view from above, and you can see how it's sort of built into the land. The land's on a big slope there, and so the architecture sort of flows out of the land and cascades down it as if it were an outgrowth of the earth itself. The French, when they built Versailles, the Palace of Versailles, did the same thing. They wanted it to look like it was the land producing these pieces of architecture. All of this meant to be a projection of strength and a projection of power. That's another reason the walls were always so thick and so massive. You want it to look powerful, you want it to look strong, you want it to look tough, to remind people who was in charge. So let's go inside to the mall and get some Orange Julius. This is kind of what you are once you go into the ancient Roman mall, you'll go to each of the taberna, which is the shop, and you might go and get some, I don't know, spaghetti, and then go to the next one and get some, I don't know, Roman dictionaries, and then go to the next one, get some sandals, maybe get your sword sharpened in the next one. It's a whole day. Anything you need, you can get at the market, which is also the basis for malls today. They're built the same way. Lots of different shops, one building, one-stop shopping. People like to buy stuff. They always have, and they still do. There's another view of the Trajan markets. Streets still intact. And then there's a reconstruction of the Forum, the entire city center, which would have not just the market, but different temples, baths, offices, and so forth. You can still walk in the old Roman Forum, what you see there on the top. The bottom is kind of a reconstruction of what it would have looked like back in the day. There's sort of an overall view, a panorama of the Forum. Always an excavation going on there. Even today, they're still excavating all of this area. More civic architecture. Now we're going to look at the baths and the circuses and the amphitheaters. These are three types of buildings that were built just to keep people happy. If you can keep the people happy, then they're less likely to rise up and try to buck the system and shirk the yoke of authority. And so we keep them happy. The cool thing about the baths, which is where we're going to start, these are the remains of the baths of Caracalla, is that anybody could go. And there was a nominal fee to go. It was something like a nickel to get in. And you could go and you could enjoy the amenities of the bathhouse. You could take a bath, which involved three different stages. You have a caldarium, which had hot water, and then you have a tepidarium, which is a room temperature water, and then they had a frigidarium, so you could do a cold plunge after you sat in the hot tub for a while. All of it done through a series of ceramic pipes, some lead pipes that they had. The condensation of the water on the outside of the ceramic pipes cooled the water down. In fact, the temperature is about 20 degrees cooler inside the Roman baths. And trust me, if you go to Rome, you're going to be seeking out that cooler weather. When I went in July, it never got below 100 degrees. And so, unless I went down to the catacombs where it's 58 degrees year-round. But, you're around millions of dead people down there, so it's a give and take, pros and cons. Anyway, you can imagine, no matter what your social status, it must have been a nice shot in the arm for your self-esteem to be able to go to the baths. Same baths that the senators went to, that the emperor would go to. Maybe you'd even see the emperor. Emperor would go and hold court in the baths with the senators. Everyone's in the hot tub, drinking wine, talking about business. Just like La Cosa Nostra back in the day when they had to, take care of leaky pipes and such. Yes, sir?
Do women go to the baths, or is it like separate baths?
Separate baths. These are all men's baths. I haven't found any surviving women's baths. Women had rights in society, and I'm sure there are some kind of women's baths. But as far as I know, these are separated. There's men's half and women's half. So, what was I saying? Baths, the family, mafia, having business. Oh, here's another view. And you can see the ceiling has collapsed. It would have had a masonry ceiling, so a stone ceiling, because you've got all the heat and cold and changes and that sort of thing. But it's in a bathhouse, and so even later on when we start building churches, and we could have masonry ceilings. Nobody wanted to go to church in a giant bathroom, and so they had wooden ceilings instead. So you could go, and there would be locker rooms there, and you could go and have your skin scraped if you wanted, and then take baths, go to the gym. A lot of good murders took place in the bathhouse because people's guard is down, and so emperors who want, or someone who wanted to become emperor, good place to go and make that happen is to strangle the emperor in his bathtub, that sort of thing. So that all went on there. That's what it would have looked like back in the day. Again, you can imagine being some poor, down on your luck schmuck with a nickel left to your name. I'm going to use that nickel and spend a day in the bathhouse. Only the Romans would think about keeping people happy that way, placating them with trips to the bathhouse so they could stay happy. Anybody can go. If you've got the money, then you can go too. Pay your nickel and take a nice bath. It must have been something to be able to walk on those floors and feel like you were somebody. It definitely would feel like Rome was taking care of you. You don't want any of that to go away. That'd be a shame. So you better mind your place and pay your taxes, and everything will be all right. Here's a layout. Of course, they've got the swimming pool where you can just go and play Marco Polo, and then go to the gym, and then here's your hot tub, your coldarium, and then the tepidarium, and then the cold plunge in the frigidarium, cooled by those ceramic pipes. There's a view from above. This is right across the street from the Colosseum, so I encourage you to go visit that when you hit the Colosseum, and I know you will. Some reconstructions of just how opulent it would have been. Not just placating the people, but this is also Rome's way of saying how awesome it is. See what we can afford to give to the people. Don't you want to be a part of the Roman Empire so you too can go and enjoy the bathhouses? Sign up today. Another reconstruction, very elaborate, covered with mosaics. Again, it would have made people feel just fantastic. And there's one, that one comes from Bath in England, named after its baths. That's the coldarium, the men's coldarium at the bathhouse in Bath. How many times can I say Bath in 60 seconds? One more time, Bath. There's some mosaics from the floors of some bathhouses. Again, nautical themes, so Neptune and fish and mermaids and eels and that sort of thing. All that we would expect to see. And then here's one from Pompeii that survived in pretty good shape. A little smaller, one or two at a time in that one. But the goal is the same. Keep everyone happy and clean. Romans were quite hygienic for their time. And then the second type of civic architecture we had to keep the people happy was the amphitheater. This is the biggest and best known of all amphitheaters, the Flavian Amphitheater. It was begun by Emperor Vespasian and then finished by his son Titus, dedicated with a 100-day-long opening ceremonies where I believe it was about 2,000 gladiators died and 15,000 exotic animals were killed, all for the 50,000 screaming happy Romans that would have filled all of these seats. A marvel of engineering. It could be completely emptied in 15 minutes. All 50,000 people could empty this in 15 minutes because there are multiple exits and ingresses and so forth. The floor, you can see it's just partially covered now, but all of this would have been covered with boards back in the day, and then sand on top of that to sop up all of the blood from the entertaining murders that would take place. There are descriptions of the stuff that would go on. All those little rooms you see There were mechanics involved. Trap doors could pop open and a tiger would jump out, and then a guy would start fighting the tiger. Or maybe some weapons would come up and the gladiators would fight to get the weapon. Or maybe another gladiator would pop up and they would just duel to the death, all while sitting in the stands and eating your popcorn and your snacks and so forth. Actually, in the Colosseum, there's one of the largest, largest variety of plant life in all of Rome is inside the Colosseum, because people would come from all over to watch these shows, and they would bring native foods with them, native seeds, and you eat sunflower seeds and drop them, and then they would sprout. So you'll find plants in the Colosseum that you don't find anywhere else. That and hundreds of cats. This thing is riddled with feral cats now, and they just cannot get rid of them. They could even flood the bottom with about 4 feet of water and perform mock naval battles at the Colosseum. Pretty fantastic stuff. Again, anybody that could afford it could go. This is what it would have looked like back in the day. 3 different levels. The bottom order of columns is Doric, the center order is Ionic, and the top order here is Corinthian. And then underneath each of those little arches, statues of your favorite gladiators. So I guess it would be like seeing Hulk Hogan or Andre the Giant or someone like that nowadays. Give the people entertainment and they won't rebel. I'm glad only the Romans did that. And it's the same thing. People still keeping everyone placated with giant ass sporting events. There's another view from above. Why is it in such bad shape? Earthquakes. Earthquakes took out about half of the outer layers of walls. Someone have popcorn? Am I the only one getting that? Or am I having a stroke or something? Jeez, that's rude. I know. So rude. Was it you? Did you get popcorn? Is that where you went?
No, but it smells really good out there.
Oh my gosh. So let's see. What else can I tell you about the Colosseum? It was named after a colossus of Nero, Emperor Nero, who was a really awful, terrible person who had an affair with his mother. And there was a giant statue of him outside, a colossus, just like those colossi we saw of Ramses II, right next to his golden house, his giant palace. And so they named it after that, the Colosseum, after that colossus. There's another view, right next to a subway, next to a beautiful church of St. Peter in Chains, rather. And then a few other items that I'll show you down the road. There's the outside now. I took that picture. And this is where I can tell my story. So I had a really great pair of sunglasses, and if you go, you've got to have sunglasses because the sun is unyielding. It has no mercy. And I broke them. And so I'm looking around to find some sunglasses, and I come out of the subway, and there's this guy. He's got this blanket laid out on the ground, and he's got sunglasses a go-go. So I go up and I pick out a pair, and I say, "How much?" And he says, 10 euros. And I said, 2 euros. Always haggle, always haggle. He said, okay, 2 euros. So I bought them and I put them on, and I'm drinking a Diet Coke. And then this lady and her daughter came by and they were looking at the sunglasses, and she picked up a pair, and I'm just watching this whole thing. And she said, how much, sir? And he says, 15 euros. And the lady said, okay, here's your 15 euros. And the guy looked over at me and went, always haggle, always haggle. They're probably worth a quarter. And I don't have them anymore. They disappeared soon after that photo you saw earlier. Another view of the inside, taken in 2003, before there was the invention of panoramic photography. This is me taking pictures like this and then stitching it all together in Photoshop later for you. For you. I worked on this for 22 years for you. So enjoy. See all the little plants? This is where they all are. They all sprout in weirdo little places. They could stretch out a big tarp over the top of it and retract it to keep people in the shade, protect them from the vicious Roman sun. All made from concrete and brick, faced with limestone on the outside. That's what the floor looked like when I was there. It just had a little walkway across it. But now they've covered about half of it, and they give concerts there. So Elton John, Paul McCartney, Ray Charles, Billy Joel, they've all given concerts in the Coliseum. And then there's a view from above with the overflow for the concert on the outside. They also showed the movie Gladiator there in 2018. I would have liked to have seen that. That would have been pretty cool. Another view, this is where the gladiators would wait in their little jail cells. This is where the cages were for the tigers and the bears and all the mechanics to open up the floor and flood it and drain it. All of that was down there. You can still walk down. There's also a lot of filthy graffiti on the walls down there in Latin, but it's all still there. Another view. Always working on it, always getting it fixed up. And then there's a view from the outside, one of those many entrances that you can come and go. And then there's a view of the outside with those three different orders of columns. It's got a lot of holes in it because a lot of the fascia was held on with iron pegs. And then over the years, different emperors would take the iron pegs out and melt them down and make cannonballs out of them. So now the only thing that's holding the Colosseum together is gravity, just the weight of the rocks on top of each other. All those extra supports are gone. And there's a view from the outside. Always people, never empty outside the Colosseum. There's a little closer view. Part of it that's in good shape. And then there's some of those holes, like giant woodpeckers have had their way with it. And then there's one more. And there's the whole enchilada. And then there's another with the labeling. You know, if you're going to go to the Colosseum, you're going to take lots of pictures of it, and I'm going to force you to see every single one, including the best one. Who's that handsome rogue? I remember that guy vaguely. Now, in the background, you can't quite see it, but there are these guys. They dress up like gladiators and centurions and so forth. You're going to be tempted to take your phone out and take a picture of it. And if you do that, don't let them see you, because if they see you, they're going to come up and demand money. And you know, they got swords, so you better pay them, because you may get harassed. These are some of the better dressed ones. There are also some with like plastic helmets on and so forth. It's just that's their gig. They stand out in front of the Coliseum and charge people to take pictures. My advice, just don't take pictures of them. Who cares? There's a reconstruction with that big giant tarp over the top to keep everyone nice and cool. Amazing feats of engineering. And then that's what it would have looked like when they flooded it, or one artist's conception of what it would have looked like when they flooded it. Had mock naval battles. The Colosseum was such a marvel that it served as the model for all other amphitheaters in the Roman Empire. So you can walk around. They're not nearly as elaborate and they're not as great, but they're the same layout, same design. This is the amphitheater from Pompeii. An aerial view with that Greek IMAX seating where each seat is successively higher as you go back, so everyone has a good view. Same type of seating they have at the Colosseum. There's one that has survived from Nimes, France. Same basic layout. And then there's one from Leptis Magna in Turkey. And there's one in Sicily. Again, various sizes depending on the economics of the day. There's one from Arles, France. You may have heard of Arles. That is where Vincent van Gogh lived for a while. This is his painting of the arena at Arles, 1889. Also the subject of my third book, Vampires. Vincent van Gogh fighting vampires. Be sure you check it out. And another amphitheater from Pompeii. That one, this is a mural that has survived that recorded a particular brawl. So there were some visiting gladiators that came in and they started talking smack about the Pompeian gladiators, which erupted into this huge fight. People from the stands came down and started fighting on the field, and it caught on fire, and hundreds of people died. And it reminds me of those soccer matches, you know, when people get all worked up and start rioting and killing each other, all in the name of good, clean fun. Same type of thing. And then the third type of civic structure that I will show you is the circus. No clowns here, no trapeze artists. This is where we have the chariot races. This is ancient Roman NASCAR. And people would bet on the chariots and go and attend, hoping for a wreck, just like at NASCAR. It's still there. This is a reconstruction of the biggest one, the Circus Maximus in Rome. It doesn't look nearly this good now. This is what it looks like now. It's just a big, dirty oval. But that's what its function was. It was a racetrack for chariots. There's a view looking down it, so you can kind of see the length of it and how they would just go in a circle. Very dangerous. Chariot race is a lot more dangerous than you would think. When they reenacted them for the movie Ben-Hur in 1959, a guy got killed when his chariot flipped over. So even pretending to have a circus race is dangerous business. The aqueduct, its whole function was to get water from here to there. This is one of the most intact ones that remains, the aqueduct at Nimes, France. The lake that it drew water from was, I think, 27 miles away. To get it to the city of Nimes, there's a slight gradient. The top of the aqueduct is a trough, and then sometimes they would also have pipes going through it. And as it goes from the source to where it's going, it goes down slightly. It's a slight gradient. So gravity is what moves the water. And then once it reaches its destination, it goes through pipes that get successively smaller. And then when that happens, you get water pressure. So the Romans had running water, water faucets, flush toilets, sewage, the whole bit, all from the aqueduct. This particular one has no mortar in between the stones. The stones are all cut with such precision that they're watertight, even though there's no cement holding them together. They're just cut with extremely good precision. And there's a view from the bottom. And then another view. Pretty too. Like a little robe hidden there that you can't see. You'll have to read the book. You'll have to read the book to get the details. There's another one near Rome that I took a really poor picture from the bus. You can see this stuff is everywhere. There's cows walking around in amongst this 2,000-year-old aqueduct ruin. It's another view. It's kind of fun. And then, of course, all that water leads to things like this, the Roman communal toilets. I thought it was kind of interesting. It's a good way to get to know people, I guess. And then in the center, to clean up afterwards, not that you asked, but I'm going to tell you, there's a bucket with a stick, with a sponge on the end of the stick. Everyone shared the sponge. Oh, those Romans. Now we'll look at religious architecture, the Roman temples. You remember our Greek temples and you remember our Etruscan temples. This one is a pretty good example of how the Romans adapted Etruscan designs into their own architecture. It's set up on a podium and it has a frontal emphasis, just like the Etruscan temples did. But then the architecture, the pediment, the columns, all of that's very Greek. So they mishmash it all together and create their own architectural style. One of the big differences between Greek temples and Roman temples is here in the pediment. In the Roman temple, this is all covered with writing, not sculpture. The Greeks like to have the sculpture and to commemorate different gods and goddesses. Here they use Latin inscriptions. That's where they keep the writing. So there's not as much sculpture on the outside of the buildings as it was in Greece. This is a very small one, but it's one of the oldest ones, the Temple of Portunus in Rome. Here's another view. The day I saw it, it was covered with graffiti all along the bottom, which was interesting. And there's one of my bad bus pictures. And then there's the back that shows half columns or engaged columns, columns that are still connected to the wall. So even on the back side where nobody goes, they give it a little bit of attention and decoration. There's the plan, very simple, a rectangle, big cella or interior area, and then a little porch, all with a frontal emphasis so that you can enter in and then go worship Portunus or Fortune. Here's another similar temple, this one also in Nimes where the aqueduct is, a little more elaborate, same basic design. A lot of people think the same architects worked on both of them since they date from about the same time. But the layout is the same. It's up on a podium. It has a frontal emphasis, just a few extra columns. There it is after its recent cleaning, a lot more palatable. The inside they used as a storage room for centuries. They would just put different broken statues and that sort of thing, just store them on the inside since it didn't function as a temple anymore. And that's what it looked like until they cleaned it out. Now you go in and there's a movie on a loop that shows you the history of this particular temple. There's a view of our composite columns on the outside, also engaged or attached to the wall. And then we have a lovely cornice or overhanging roof here that gives you a little extra protection from the rain and elements. Roman temples could be round. This is the Temple of the Sibyl, also Temple of the Vesta. Round temples also were places where each city could house its eternal flame, which represents like the life of the city. This one, some of the fascia is gone so that you can see the concrete core on the inside, and then that would have been faced with bricks, which then would have also been faced with marble. So again, just quite the wide variety of shapes and innovations through the use of concrete, through the use of arches. Another round temple. This is the oldest marble temple that has survived. Temple of Hercules Victor. And then one more, the sanctuary of Fortuna Primigenia on the Palatine Hill, also sort of growing out of the earth itself. Very a creative way to build a building using concrete and the topography of the land itself to make a statement of power and opulence. There it is from above, and then there's the Trajan Market just behind it. Temple dedicated to the goddess of fortune. There's a closer view, and you can see all the concrete core where the fascia has been removed. Where did it go? Well, a lot of times as centuries go by, people will build new temples, and they'll just take things from old temples and put them on new temples. And so that's what happened at the pyramids. Pyramids used to be covered in gleaming white limestone, but they needed to build some Islamic mosques, and so they went and took all that off and made mosques out of them in Egypt. There's a closer view of the concrete at Primogenia with those big chunks in it. I just thought that was kind of fun. And then there's a view from above. This is the Pantheon, probably one of the most famous Roman temples. It was the largest domed structure on the planet back in its day. It's a temple dedicated to all the gods, known and unknown. So you need a big temple to do that. It's basically a big drum with a dome on top, and then they stuck a porch on the front. It's pretty easy to grasp, but it's huge. The tippy top of the dome is about 142 feet from the floor, so it has a good sense of strength and massiveness and power, all of the things that we want to project as a Roman builder. You can see that here. There's a view from the ground, and you can see the inscriptions there. And then a view from above with an Egyptian obelisk liberated from Egypt at some point and brought to Rome as the spoils of war. If you stand on the porch and look directly across, you will see a McDonald's. Don't go in there. You're going to want to. Your DNA is going to say, oh, McDonald's, you know that. There's good food. Don't go there. You're in Rome, for crying out loud. Eat some Italian food. Lay off the fries for just a little bit, because that's where everybody goes, and everybody's going to know you're American if you go eat at the McDonald's across from the Pantheon. So do old Mr. Waterfield a favor and just stay away. Another view, you can see just how thick the walls are, just the sheer massiveness of the building. All of that meant to communicate that we are the Romans, we are powerful, you are small and weak, do not rebel. Don't you want to be a part of this fantastic, strong organization? There's a view from the ground. You can see the dome creeping up there. We have a nice oculus, or a circular hole in the middle to allow light and ventilation into the interior. If they open up the front doors, it creates an updraft, so then when it rains, rain won't get into the inside. It just blows to the side, so because it's a constant stream of air. There's kind of a cutaway view of the plan of the Pantheon. You can see the thickness of the dome is thicker at the bottom to support the weight of the masonry, and then we also have coffering on the inside. We scoop out squares of masonry to make it a little lighter, and then also to kind of decorate the interior, make it prettier. There's some of that coffering, and then there's an actual view. Back in the day, each one of these little squares was painted blue to represent the heavens. And when you walk in, it's quite an elaborate space. A lot of the decor you see is added later on. Still quite nice. That's what it looked like in 1740. Still looks like that today. Still very elaborate. That's my poor view of the oculus. I was trying to get a picture of this pigeon that was flying around, but he flew out of There's my artsy fartsy picture of the sunlight shining through the oculus. Some of the walls, only the finest materials, all representing the opulence of Rome. And that's also where Raphael is buried. If you want to go visit a Renaissance artist's tomb, that's where you go. The last type of building I'll show you is the basilica. The basilica was basically a big meeting hall, but it serves as the inspiration for all subsequent Christian church design, and I'll show you that. The basilica, located in the Forum area, and again, it's just a meeting hall where people could assemble and discuss different things. This is an aerial view of the Forum. This is the building we're looking at right here. The design that we're paying attention to is this large central aisle and then two side aisles so that people could come and go as they please without disturbing all of the goings on in the center. There's another view, and you can imagine having church in here. Someone's at this end speaking to the crowd, and then people can kind of come and go without disturbing what's going on. Churches are laid out the same way today. Side aisles and then main aisles. One more view. This is the ruins of one of the first churches, the Constantinian Basilica, built by Emperor Constantine, who was the first Christian Roman emperor. And so once that happens, he makes Christianity legal and also the national religion of the Roman Empire. So now Christianity gets funded, and instead of having to meet in people's houses and behind the bushes and stuff, now they can build these grand, massive churches, and that's exactly what Constantine did. Not much left of it today, but back in the day when it was still intact, it could hold about 14,000 people at once standing on the inside, and you can see that large central aisle and then two side aisles so that people can kind of come and go. That's what it would have looked like back in the day. You've got a big statue of Constantine at one end to remind you of who paid for this. And then there's another reconstruction. Part of this Colossus of Constantine exists. The head is still around, also a hand and a knee, but that's it. There's the plan. We find basilicas, once Constantine starts building them, they start popping up all over the Roman Empire. Here's one from Libya, which was part of the Roman Empire at one time. Same type of design, large central aisle, two side aisles, and then an apse, which is the focal point. Here the entrances are on the side instead of in the front like they will be later. And then there's another view. In its day, it was about 525 feet long. So it could have held a whole bunch of folks. That gives you a good bit of scale. I don't know if you can see the circle, but there's a person. Just to give you an idea of how big this enclosed space was back in the day.